A chambermaid swaps places with a prima donna for one evening. Welcome to Storytime with Phantoms of the Opera. The story today comes from the autobiography of Emma Calvé, which is full of fun anecdotes and fascinating vignettes from a lost world. Emma Calvé was a dramatic soprano who lived between 1858 and 1942. And like most of the singers of her generation, she idolized Adelina Patti, who is the queen of song of the previous generation, but she was still performing for much of Calvé's career. For a little bit of context, Patti was very short. She was under 5 foot tall, and Calvé was quite tall. So when the stage manager asks about her weight, it's for practical reasons. Will all make sense in a moment. Are you ready? Then I'll begin. This takes place in the early 1890s. Continuing my tour through Italy, I went to Venice, where I sang at the Teatro de Fenice, a charming 18th century hall. I gave over 20 performances of Ophelia with tremendous success, for I was the spoiled darling of the public. One afternoon I went to the theatre rather earlier than usual. As I entered, I saw a group of porters and mechanics hovering around a little sedan chair which stood in the wings and which I had noticed before. It had been built for Patti on her last stay in Venice. She feared the dampness of the canals and insisted on being carried to and from her hotel in this specially constructed portantina. As I made my way toward my dressing room, the stage manager, who had been in animated conversation with the group around the sedan chair, approached me. "Will Mademoiselle be so kind as to tell me how much she weighs?" he asked. 125 pounds, I answered, much surprised by the question. "Splendid," he exclaimed, "just the thing. Mademoiselle, if she wishes, can use Patti's sedan chair. The porters will not carry more than a certain weight, but Mademoiselle is exactly right." I was, of course, delighted. Every evening I made the journey through the narrow alleys of old Venice, and as my portantina was unique, I was known all along the route. The street urchins began cheering as soon as they saw it appear at the end of a street. "Ecco la prima donna," they shouted. "Here she comes! Evviva, evviva!" My farewell performance at the Fenice was a gala night. The stage was inundated with flowers, the audience wildly enthusiastic. Finally, it was time to go home, and my mother sent my maid to call the porters. This maid, Valérie, was a Parisian, dark, graceful, and not unlike me in build and colouring. She loved to imitate my way of walking, my gestures, sometimes even my clothes. She wore a mantilla, and at a distance might easily be mistaken for her mistress. My mother and I sat waiting in my dressing room for a long time. Valérie seemed to be unaccountably slow. We were beginning to wonder what had happened to her when she burst into the room. "Oh, mademoiselle, forgive me," she exclaimed, all out of breath. "I didn't do it on purpose. They carried me off in the portantina. There were serenaders, gentlemen in evening clothes. It was grand, a regular triumph. They thought it was mademoiselle." She stopped for breath, but before we could ask a single question, she was off again. "When we got to the hotel," she continued excitedly, "the manager opened the door with a deep bow. But when he saw me, how he jumped! 'It's nothing but the maid,' he shouted in a rage. 'But really it isn't my fault,' Valérie concluded plaintively. 'I can't help it if I look like mademoiselle. The porters brought me back, but the celebration is all over. Everyone is gone.' My mother was very angry and wanted to dismiss the girl on the spot. But I could only laugh. It seemed to me so absurd. When we got back to the hotel, no one was in sight, but the steps were covered with flowers, strewn at the feet of my chambermaid. In my own room at last, I could not sleep. I stood on my balcony, looking out over the peaceful lagoon. It was a marvellous night. Venice was still a city of gondolas and midnight serenades. There were no motorboats to spoil the picture as there are today. My mother was thrilled with joy at my successes. "Never, never have you had such a triumph," she exclaimed again and again. She had forgiven Valérie her escapade and only remembered the flowers, the applause, the tributes of appreciation and enthusiasm. Before we left the hotel the next day, we were presented with a bill. For carrying off in the Portantina, 200 francs. My mother, greatly incensed and surprised, called the manager. "What does this mean?" she demanded. The unhappy man was overcome with embarrassment. "Patty's manager used to arrange for a triumphal progress of this sort," he explained. "He hired the hall boys and musicians from the hotel. I thought Mademoiselle, too, would like it. I'm sorry if you were displeased." "It's really too much," wailed my mother, "to have to pay such a price for the glorification of a maid." In after years, I was telling this tale to one of my comrades, who had also sung with success in Venice. "Oh, Calvé, what a blow!" she exclaimed when I had finished my story. "You have shattered one of my most precious illusions. My poor father must have had to foot the bill, while I thought that I'd been acclaimed by the flower of Venetian nobility." That's all for today, but come back next time for another story from the Phantoms of the Opera. Won't you?